I can see on the video that the lighting is a little bit screwball today, but whatever. It is what it is. The audio is fine, as far as I can tell. Welcome to the first of 2 episodes of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's Wednesday, August the 14th. We're rumbling along. Episode 1, the one you're watching / listening to right now, we're going to be hearing from Matt Smith, my good buddy from Down Under, who is frantically trying to get his child to take a nap, but we were able to squeeze in a recording around it. My kids, I think I said this actually during the recording you guys are going to listen to or hear or see in a moment. Getting the pieces to fit is a little bit of an adventure when there are smaller children involved. I know that I chose this, and so complaining about it seems a little bit stupid, but you know, you see these like little jumps that the kids make in logic and reason and what they require, which is great. But also because I have the 7 and a 4-year-old, and like you see these things a 7-year-old are doing, you're like, okay, well, I guess I got 3 years more of whatever that thing is with the other one. And SMITTY, he's got a young one, got another one on the way. So he's trying to get his to take a nap. I'm trying to get mine to take a bath. My wife is trying to keep him from screaming in the background of the recording. And the aristocrats, or whatever you say at the end of that. I'm Dan Besbris, by the way. This is, of course, at Old Man Squad, as far as presentations go. A bunch of you are finding that Twitter feed lately, which is very cool. It's up to 921 follows now. Would love to see that Old Man Squad feed get up over 1,000. By the way, it will also follow you back. And here at the beginning of the show, a quick reminder, please do take a second to click that like button if you're watching the show. No matter how you're taking in the program, please subscribe. That is the single largest thing you can do. You'll get a bunch of old episodes downloaded. That's big for us. Listening to the advertisements on the after the fact edition because YouTube doesn't think we qualify yet. All of these things are very important in the continued growth of the Old Man Squad. I need your help with this, especially now. Once we get to like a nice chunky size, a la what the old podcast was, I won't bug you quite so much about that. Hopefully we'll have, sponsors at that point. But for now, I need you guys with the likes, the ratings, the subscribings, all that good stuff. Let's not wait any further. You guys can watch this video. Matt and I recorded this last night. Let's get it rolling now. This is SMITTY time. Happy SMITTY Day, everyone. And a happy SMITTY Day to you, SMITTY. I have not done as good a job of getting that to be the new nomenclature for sleepers, and I apologize for that, Matt. I hope you can forgive me.
Of course, mate. It's lovely to be on. Lovely to talk to you again.
Thanks for the forgiveness. We're talking to Matt Smith today. S-Man Sports on Twitter, the pride of Basketball Monster, and one of my good buddies here in the fantasy community. And I thought, Matt, that you would be, and then, we'll have Josh on a little bit later in the week, really interesting kind of juxtapositions in talking about the Yahoo Big Board to my typical target, which is more 9-cat, more games cap, more roto-y. Whereas, if I'm remembering right, SMITTY, you do more 8-cat, you do more head-to-head. And so the players that jump out to you on this fresh look at Yahoo are probably going to be a little bit different than someone playing Roto 9-cat, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I still love Roto, and that's probably my preferred format. And I do love playing that format, but yeah, do play a little bit more head-to-head across the season. And for that sake, I do like players who can give you a big boost in 1, 2, 3 categories. I think that's a bit more important because they help you win the week. Obviously in Roto, you're looking, season long and big picture. So yeah, that's where some differences can come in on the big board and players on who we like and who we don't like.
Yeah, just from a strategic standpoint, before we get into your favorites from the Yahoo first board, when you talked about, and this is something that I've tried to enumerate a little bit on the show, this concept of like, when you're playing Roto, you're looking for just this across the board, like decent player that has a much greater function to your team. because you're accruing all season long. Guys doing a little bit in everything all year is helpful. Whereas on the head-to-head side, you just mentioned looking for folks that are maybe a little bit more of a like a sharp instrument in 2 or 3 categories can be much more useful, because you really don't need to be great at more than 5 or 6 things on the head-to-head side. Is that like, how can you paint that in? I feel like I'm only able to really do the skeleton on that. Why are you looking for players that have that sort of like haymaker in a few categories?
Yeah, I think because then the way I structure my team and the way I go about building my head-to-head rosters, if you can get those difference makers and those guys that can go big in, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4 categories, then once you've got that lead in a head-to-head week, you can kind of park that and then focus on the other categories. And that's where your streaming comes in. That's where your bench comes in. And then you can focus on those other categories that are up for grabs and categories that you need to attack or defend. So like you said, in a roto sense, maybe someone like a Franz Wagner, who's quite good across the board. You might lean more and doesn't turn the ball over in your case for 9-cat. But he's like an excellent roto player, but I might be looking someone more in those mid rounds. It might be a Darius Garland with the assists instead that I think I need, in that range, or if it's a Karl Anthony Towns with some extra rebounds, depending on how I've built my team. But I guess, yeah, that's just a sort of a brief look at that. One of the differences between trying to build a roto league or roto team to a head-to-head team.
All right, let's dive into players, because that's what everybody wants. You know me, I like to sidetrack on strategy every once in a while. Again, talking to Matt Smith of Basketball Monster, S-Man Sports on social media. Who do you like on the Yahoo big board? And I know it's going to change in a couple of weeks, but folks are drafting now, so it's useful for them. And I think it's also useful for folks to kind of have names that they watch that are bouncing around. So where do you want to start? You are officially holding the wheel on this boat that's probably most days headed for an iceberg. Can you steer us away from it?
Yeah, well, this is going to make me sound like a bit of a hypocrite because I'm just talking about guys who go big in different categories. And this first guy I'm going to mention actually doesn't have a big killer category, but he is so even across the board. And I think there's room for value. And that's Jalen Williams from OKC, currently sitting at 42. But I think he could be a top 25 player and potentially even 20. And the big kicker this year, I think, without Josh Giddey, I think that he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot more. I think we'll see his assists to go to maybe 5 or 6 per game, with the elite efficiency, the good steals, the good threes, the points are there as well. He's just so well-rounded, got an amazing fantasy game. We've seen that since his rookie season. And yeah, I think he's in for a really big season. Like I said, potentially a top 20 and top 25. So yeah, if you can get him in the third round, good value. If the fourth, then yeah, he's a must-grab player there in any format.
You see eye to eye with the great Rhett Bauer on Monday's show. That was one of his selections, and I can't argue with you. I mean, Jalen Williams was a top 30 range guy the second half of last year once the steals and blocks kind of came back to where we assumed they would be, and that was with Josh Giddey doing stuff. So, you're like, I wish that I could play devil advocate on that one, but he's very much one of my favorites on the board. I think my only fear with Jalen Williams right now is we all like him so much at 42. I'm petrified that on Yahoo's next board shuffle, he's going to be at like 28, and then we're all going to be screwed. How high would you go on him if you had to?
I think at this stage, if I could get him in the third, I'd be happy with that. So sort of just outside that 25 range, so anywhere sort of 25 to 35. I think that'd be about right. And especially if you've already got a point guard and you've got a big, and then you can just, stick a beautiful, well-rounded wing player in between them, just to get that nice trio to start out your lineup. But yeah, we'll see what happens, with the next update of Yahoo ranks.
All right, give me number 2.
Number 2, just sort of working down the board. I really like Brandon Miller as well. He's currently sits there at number 70. We saw he was really good last season when Terry Rozier got traded. And again, I think he's another guy who could have sort of top 50 potential this season. LaMelo Ball will obviously be back, and then Josh Green, but I don't think he'll do a real lot. So with Ball, Miller, and Bridges there, I think Brandon Miller's a standout in those sort of mid rounds, and again, really nice scoring boost. The efficiency is not too bad. The threes are excellent as well. And if you can get the assists up a little bit and the steals up a bit as well, yeah, then Brandon Miller could be, like I said, a top 50 player.
He had an interesting end of season last year because a lot of those guys were down. LaMelo was down for most of the campaign. Rozier got traded. It was mostly just Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges, and then, you know, like a carousel of loonies for Charlotte. He, over the last month, averaged almost 20 points per game, 4.5 boards, 3 threes. He was at about 46-86 splits on percentages, but he didn't do much defensively. Is that a thing you think Brandon Miller can get cooking a little bit better this coming season?
Yeah, I think so. I think he can average over a steal a game, and he showed at times last year. Yeah, he was sort of around that mark or a little bit higher. So I don't expect him to be a big shot blocker from the wing position. But yeah, I think particularly with LaMelo back, I think that could aid his defense a little bit. So yeah, we'll see. But coming into his second season, I expect a nice little boost there for Brandon Miller.
I'm looking at, I think he was in the like 50 some odd range down the stretch last year. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, well, the last 3 months, and this is just 8-cat, he was about 67th.
Oh,
it dropped off a little bit after that. But yeah, I think that was a little bit to do with maybe fatigue, and his field goal percentage dropped off a little bit about that time as well. But yeah, so again, I mean, that gives you a bit of an idea. If he was 67 over the last 3 months, again, that was without LaMelo, and he's sitting there at 70. We put a bit of an upgrade on that, and second year semi sort of breakout. So yeah, if you can get him in that sort of 50-60 range, I think there's still a little bit of value to have.
You know, what's funny too is that he's another guy who doesn't really fit the mold that you talked about of like a head-to-head, really, really, really good at 2 or 3 things kind of guy. He could be decent at scoring. Looks like threes might be one of his stronger categories. Free throw seems like it could be decent. Like, I don't know that he's going to be horrible in any one particular thing, the way that we think about like, oh, this head-to-head guy is great in 3 things, but he's absolutely awful in one. He doesn't really fit the mold of that type of player either.
No, he doesn't. And again, that's depending on how you're sort of building your team. I like to build with getting my point guards and bigs early, and really establishing, you know, some good scoring, some good assists, the good rebounds, the good blocks with my guard and my big, and then sort of round the roster out a little bit later on with these wings that can do a little bit of everything and don't really hurt you in, you know, some key categories. So, you know, Brandon Miller fits that, but you know, yeah, if you are sitting in those mid rounds and you've gone, you know, elsewhere early on, it might be a Josh Giddey and you need that assist boost, or, you know, yeah, it might be a big, which we've talked about a number of times in this area, whether it's a Jakob Poeltl or a Yusuf Nurkic, Zubac, Claxton, those sort of guys. So again, depending on how you sort of shape your roster out early, but yeah, I still like Brandon Miller in those mid rounds for some scoring and threes, and just a lovely wing play you can fit in there and help out any sort of team in any sort of format.
We got a bunch more with Matt coming up, but before we do that, Smitty, what are you working on these days? Let's do a mid-show promo.
So working through all my positional tiers for Basketball Monster. So I believe we'll open in the next sort of week or so. So stay tuned for that. And then, yeah, my tiers will be out, if not when we go live, but shortly after. And then we'll have sort of all the usual, articles leading into the season when it starts in a couple of months.
S-Man Sports on social. Who else do you like? Where should we head next?
I like Cam Thomas as well at 92. He's just going to have a ton of shots there in Brooklyn, and should be in for a huge season. So again, if you need a sort of a scoring boost, and again, he's probably one more in the head-to-head frame who can give you that scoring boost, and maybe, you know, week to week you can sort of manage the field goal efficiency a little bit. And one after that, I mean, you raised this guy when we spoke last, and that's Ivica Zubac from the Clippers at 112. That just represents great value. Only Mo Bamba there as his backup. And we know Zubac doesn't need a real lot of playing time to put up fantasy numbers. And, you know, yeah, he should be in for sort of maybe 28 or 30 minutes a season. So I think, you know, that's a that's a solid top 100 season that's going to be coming out of Zubac. So yeah, I think that's a really good pick as well.
Cam Thomas does, you mentioned, fit that more head-to-heady mold. He scores like a maniac. He's a free throw percent big time positive. He's likely to be a field goal percent disaster. He doesn't get any defensive stats at all. So he is more of that, like, he can be really, really good in a few things. Were you at all surprised, by the way, that this was the pre-rank for Cam Thomas? I thought for sure with the Mikal Bridges trade and like, this is Cam's team right now, really, that like, I thought his pre-rank was going to be 75 or higher. To see him in the 90s, I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah, a little bit. I think once we get the update, we'll probably see that jump up another couple of rounds. So that may hurt the value a little bit. But yeah, like you said, with the points and the threes and the free throw percentage as well, give you that big boost. And again, in a head-to-head league, if you're rolling out Cam for 2 or 3 games, that might be the difference in points. And then you can focus, on some other categories that are up for grabs.
He averaged, by the way, over the final 2 months last year, 25 points per game. And I get it. Yeah. There were guys that were out and blah, blah, blah. But like, that team is going nowhere fast. And he's the guy that can score still. High volume, 88.5, 89% at the free throw line over that stretch. I mean, I get it. Yeah. This is a guy that I've never been like ultra excited about because he does have those giant holes in his game. And that's tougher on the roto side. But if you're doing that much on offense, that can kind of overwhelm the categories where you're a little bit weaker. And then as far as Zubac goes, this is another one that I was kind of surprised about. And I haven't talked about him a whole lot because he is kind of that quiet producer. But just thinking back to last year, last 2 months, which is what I'm kind of rolling on right now, Zubac was number 88 last season in only 26 minutes per ball game. Mm-hmm. I'm very much on board with you, by the way, on this one. It's another one where I can't even pretend to play devil's advocate. And like you mentioned, we'd actually talked about him on a previous show together. I also see him getting more opportunity simply because with Harden doing more offense, that's going to be a lot of screen setting that he wasn't necessarily involved in every play last year. Weaker backups, like you said, just Mo Bamba instead of they had Tice and Mason Plumlee behind him last year. I don't think anybody should expect Zubac to block 1.5, 2 shots a game. That's never really been his thing, but he's a big man who has decent both percentages, which is kind of nice. He'll get you a few more rebounds. I actually think it's not out of the question that he could be pushing top 80 this season. Am I too bullish there? Or do you think that's reachable in 9-cat? 8-cat, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's even reachable in both 8 and 9-cat. And like you said, the good free throw percentage, sort of mid to high 70s. So again, he's not giving you, that big, negative in that category like a lot of other big guys do. Strong double player. Yeah, 2 blocks a game is going to be handy. And just quickly touching back on Cam Thomas, we know that points are so difficult to find outside the top sort of 40 and 50. So to find a 25-point scorer sitting there in sort of, the 80 to 100 range potentially, that can give you a massive boost to your team.
It's weird to see a player like Cam Thomas there. No, normally if there's a guy that scores like he does in this range, it's someone that I feel like typically doesn't have as clear a path to minutes. Like this is I found this guy at 95 who's a big time scorer, but I don't know if he's going to play more than 24 minutes a game. Cam Thomas, by all accounts, looks like he's going to be playing 34, 35 minutes a night, right?
Yeah, definitely. He should be up in that range. And, again, whether it's starting or coming off the bench, the minutes are going to be there. The scoring's going to be there. It's just a matter of how many, rebounds, assists, and threes he can add on to that as well.
Do you see, and I know they have Dennis Schroeder there, but do you see Cam Thomas possibly increasing the assists at all, or am I reaching too hard there?
I mean, we know that Cam Thomas doesn't like to pass the ball that much. He prefers to shoot it than pass it. So I think we know what we're going to get with Cam, and we're drafting him for his scoring rather than his passing ability.
Yeah. Even when he was basically doing everything, the last 15 games, he was still only at 3.5 assists on 20 shots and 7 free throws a game. That's big man level assists when you've got that kind of usage. So yes, it is A little bit of a black hole that's probably not coming out. Although I'm sure they'll say the right things about him, wanting to get guys more involved, and then everything will level off again. Matt, do you have anybody else on the list? I don't want to spend too long on these if you got a few more in the chamber.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's go deeper. So, Ja Morant sitting there at 313.
Yeah, what? What happened? That feels like an oversight, right?
Yeah, so that'll obviously be rectified when Yahoo does an update. Marcus Smart, Marcus Smart's at 221. Christian Braun from Denver at 239. He's going to have more opportunity this season as well with KCP leaving. And Jalen Smith, he's another one that I spoke about last time we talked on a podcast together. Dan at 261. I think that's excellent value as well. There's 17 minutes that Drummond leaves behind from last season. So if Smith steps straight into those, and then, it's only one, injury for Vucevic, and then, it's a run, don't walk situation for Jalen Smith to get him off the waiver wire. So I think he should be pretty much drafted in most leagues as well. And we'll see what happens, come the off season and the training camps and that sort of thing. Do you want to comment on any of those guys before I give you one more?
Give me one more, and then I'll ask you a question on all of them. All
right. The last one is Noah Clowney, 371. There at Brooklyn. Not sure if he'll start or not, but there is a path there to minutes for him at power forward. We saw a bit of him very late last season. And again, not sure whether he'll have standard league relevance, but for those in 14, 16, 20 team type leagues, really like what potentially Noah Clowney has to offer there. And again, we'll wait and see what happens in training camps. But I don't think Noah Clowney should be sitting there at 371.
So let me ask you one question about each guy, and then I'll let you get back to helping your wife try to get your kid to take a nap. What the hell happened with Ja Morant? Like, what's your guess on this one? I'll bug Dan Titus about it on Thursday when he's on the podcast. But how does Ja end up outside the top 300? It feels like somebody just forgot.
Yeah, I can only guess that it's got something to do with either total minutes played last season or total production, with Ja missing all of those games. And again, Marcus Smart's in a similar boat because he missed a lot of last season through injury. So, or maybe it's just a Memphis, Grizzlies thing as well. And the way they do their totals and their rankings. But like I said, I'm sure those guys will push up into Ja will probably push up into top 50, and Marcus Smart will push up into the top sort of 100-ish range. I would expect.
What do you think is the best case scenario for Marcus Smart?
I think if he can get back to sort of a top 80, top 100 guy with his good steals, good threes, good assists, that's what you're drafting him for. We know he won't score a lot, and his field goal percentage at times, can be pretty difficult to swallow. Again, probably more of a guy for head to head than Roto, but depending on who you put around him. A key piece to that Grizzlies team.
I'm very much on board with you on the Jalen Smith thing. That's also a name that Rhett Bauer brought up, so you guys seeing eye to eye on that one. Rhett described it as basically having almost the same fantasy profile as Vooch in front of him, and mostly not a ton defensively, but decent percentages, points, rebounds for the most part. Do you think, I guess my question on Jalen Smith is, because I want to find a reason to put him on my club, but do you feel like it's going to require some patience at the beginning of the year? Because it also sort of feels like he's a guy that may not be inside the top 130, 140 at the start of the season, but like you mentioned, like he's an injury or a Vooch is tired of playing for a bad team or a trade or whatever away. How do you play with someone like that? Actually, this is maybe more strategic than it is just about Jalen Smith. How do you handle that type of player in your league? Do you draft him and stash? Do you try to have him like on the quick trigger ad? What's your play there?
So in terms of drafting, I'm a big believer that the last pick or the last couple of picks, when you draft, you should be owning or rostering the highest upside guy that there is. So normally for me, that's looking at if there's an injury in front of that player, who's going to step into, say, 30, 32 minutes a night and can break out. And Jalen Smith fits that bill with an injury to Nikola Vucevic. You know, and Drummond was that last season, again, in the same position. You know, we've seen like Dennis Schroeder was sort of that guy, you know, a few years ago as well. You know, it might be, you know, if it's a Trey Jones, if Chris Paul gets injured, that might be another one in deeper leagues. But in terms of rostering them to start the season, that's really a gut feel. And depending on how your team starts out, I'm generally a bit of a slower starter in head-to-head leagues because I'm trying to plan for, you know, that 4 to 6 to 8 week mark down the season, and I draft the guys for a reason and try to be patient with them and see whether they can step into a role and into bigger minutes. But yeah, there's also, you know, at times you do have to, you know, maybe pull the trigger quickly, and it is important to jump on that hot free agent during the first, you know, 1 or 2 weeks of the season, because then that can sort of set you up, you know, leading into Christmas and through the mid part of the year. So it really is sort of a gut feel, listening to different podcasts and reading different things, and yeah, just finding out why things are happening, what's likely to change. And again, your point with Vucevic and the Bulls was a good one. Like, they're probably going to want to start out the season, you know, winning and at least being competitive. But then come later on, once you fall out of the playoff race, then it's like, right, we are going to start about thinking, you know, to next season, and do we trade Vucevic, or do we trade Zach LaVine, or, you know, what happens around the Bulls in particular. So yeah, plenty of sort of factors in play there.
Yeah, there's a lot of balls bouncing around, because I'm very much with you. I love the Jalen Smith idea, and I want to find a way to take that road again. I tried to take that road with the Pacers, and he got Rick Carlisle'd a little bit, but it does feel like it's a clearer path, at least now, where he is, versus trying to find minutes in the Pacers situation. Just a quick recap here. The names that we heard from Matt Smith, I may have missed one, by the way. If I missed one, please fill it in. Jalen Williams, Brandon Williams, Cam Thomas, Ivica Zubac, John Morant, Marcus Smart, Jalen Smith, Noah Clowney. I think there was someone else before Clowney. Christian Braun, right, on Denver. Of all of those guys, and this is a little bit of a dumb question, but I'm going to pose it anyway. Do you feel any of these guys is like a can't miss in a draft where you'll do a little bit of reaching for them, or is it really about where they are on the Yahoo board right now, or some combination?
Yeah, it's about sort of where they are, and again, how I'm building my team, and again, like the format and the settings are obviously crucially important at play here. So, you know, if Cam Thomas is sitting there at 92, then yeah, I'll be taking that. Zubac at 100, I'll be taking that. Walker Kessler's another name that I didn't mention, but he's there at 125. And again, there are maybe some talk that he may start this season. But, you know, we know that his elite shot blocking, you know, can be a valuable asset as well to a team. But again, it's about sort of where they are, where they fall, who else is around them, you know, who else has fallen on draft day, what I've done previously, what's going to happen in the future. Oh, not what's going to happen in the future as such, but what's still on the board. And that's where, you know, I think my tiers come into play, because you can see that, you know, if point guards have gone off the board early, then, you know, there might only be a couple of good ones left. And that's where you might need to get your Ja Morant or your Josh Giddey in there. And the wing players, you know, generally they're later and they're easier to find off waiver wires. So, yeah, it's a topic in a podcast for another day, but that's when, you know, positional and categorical scarcity comes into play as well. So, yeah, we've gone into a bit of a deep dive there about fantasy basketball and all the nuances, but I do think it's important.
It's what we do. And that was a very nice tie-in, by the way, to the Matt Smith tiers available at Basketball Monster. That's coming up in the not-too-distant future, as he mentioned earlier in the show. Matt, again, is at SManSports on Twitter. Dare I say, Matt, that one of the two of the names you gave might even classify as a SMITTY?
Yeah, they might.
Maybe. I'm going to get you back to your day, as promised. I never run long, he says, tongue-in-cheek. Matt, thank you so much. I know that scheduling-wise, this is tough for us between all the different things. This is like my kids just got out of the bath and yours is going down for a nap, but we got it in, and so everybody gets to enjoy this. This will air I think everybody's going to be listening to this on Wednesday morning Pacific time. It's actually Wednesday, like afternoon for you, right?
Yes,
right now.
correct.
It's Tuesday night for me. I continue to be confused because I'm an idiot, but whatever. People seem to put up with me. Matt Smith, thank you so much, my man.
Anytime. Appreciate it, Dan, and always good to chat. Take care.
And that was Matt Smith giving us the Smitty's board. Still, I don't know what I got to do to get you guys to start calling sleepers Smitties, but I'm going to keep trying. Here is the list once again at the very end. I'll put it up on the screen for those that are watching live. Please do, by the way, nice segue, those that are watching with us, please hit that like button on YouTube and subscribe. If you're listening after the fact, please, Lord, subscribe. Apple, Spotify, whatever it takes. Let's keep growing this thing. The Matt Smith list from today: Jalen Williams, Brandon Miller. I don't know why I said Brandon Williams during the recording you guys just listened to. Cam Thomas, Ivica Zubac, John Morant, although that one, you know, as soon as Yahoo adjusts their board, that one's going to be off the table. Marcus Smart, Jalen Smith, Christian Braun, and Noah Clowney, more of the deep league, deep sleeper, should the path open up in Brooklyn. We know that Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith are on the trade block. That's the kind of thing that could kind of pop that loose. There was one question from the chat room that I can't really answer myself on behalf of Matt, but I will address it. Interesting take on Christian Braun. What about Peyton Watson? He looks interesting as well. I'm inclined to agree with you, Aaron, in the chat room. Aaron of the chat room. Peyton Watson is interesting. He has an extremely high block rate for a sort of rangy, not that gigantic wing. We'll see how things shake out in Denver. It does feel like Braun has the first crack at the minutes. He was always kind of like the first man up off the bench outside, you know, this past year, because it was Bruce Brown the year before that. And there's no KCP anymore, so presumably Braun is going to be the starter. I'm not a huge fan of Brown's fantasy game, so I'm more in the, I think, wait and see on him to see if he can kind of put it together to have enough 9-cap fantasy value. Peyton Watson is intriguing should the minutes increase because his fantasy lines tend to be a little bit more 9-category interesting or whatever, translatable. But there's the list again. The other ones, really cool names. We had talked about Jalen Williams on the show a bunch. Everybody, that's a big fantasy analyst darling there. The other names on this board we haven't talked about a whole lot. Jalen Smith as a slightly deeper option. That was one that came up with Rhett Bauer on Monday. But Brandon Miller, I think he got mentioned in passing by Rhett on Monday as well. That's a relatively new one. Cam Thomas was a name that came up a little bit in the kind of who are the big winners from free agency discussions we had back about a month ago with all the various guests on the pod, but hadn't come up since, which kind of surprised me because, like I said with Matt, I was blown away that, and I don't know why I didn't mention him earlier, that Cam Thomas is pre-ranked in the 90s. And, you know, I get it. It's because he doesn't have steals or blocks or field goal percent or boards or assists, really. He's more of your kind of traditional, what I've referred to over the years on the podcast as the shooting guards fantasy line, which is free throws, threes, points, and sometimes you get a steal out of them, but not so much with Cam Thomas. So it does cap him a bit. But as Matt pointed out, you know, if you're hunting points, he's really like the last 20-point scorer available on the board, at least when you look at Yahoo's projection engine, outside of like an RJ Barrett, who's such a train wreck in percentages that he's not even really in consideration. Same story kind of with Jalen Green, who's not a train wreck in free throw, but very similar in fantasy profile to Cam Thomas, just without the big free throw positive. So that was an interesting one, at least I thought. Ivica Zubac, he and I see eye to eye on that one. I think Zubac is your after 100 center du jour. He's the guy that I'm targeting, at least, as big man after 100. Marcus Smart is an interesting one. I don't know if I'm 100% with Matt on Marcus Smart. What he was able to do last year was still kind of outside that 100 range, and that was with big steals numbers. But it's going to come down to whether or not he can get some assists this year, giving the ball now to better teammates who are not on the shelf anymore. And then Noah Clowney, who, that's a really interesting one and kind of your deep sleeper, which is very cool. to get out of our buddy Matt Smith. S-Man Sports, once again, is where you can find Matt on social media, and his work is available at Basketball Monster. Here's what's coming up on the podcast over the rest of the day, week, year, month, whatever schedule you guys want to push it through, as you are, of course, doing the liking and the subscribing and the following on the social media as well. I tell you about it. Later today, time TBD, it'll probably be mid to late afternoon, we'll be talking to Adam Stock, the punt master himself. And I want to dig in with Adam a bit on how this first look at the board kind of colors his ability to start thinking about punt. Because remember last year, and Adam told us this when we had him on a month ago or 2 months ago, or whatever it was, he saw the board and he was like, oh, look, there's all these traditional centers going between 45 and 70. I can punt threes or free throw percent or some combination of these things because there are all of these very affordable big man options. Those guys are not in that same window anymore. Or if they are, they're kind of pushed to the opposite corners of it. Like Jalen Duren is up at the front end at 50. Where's Mark Williams? He's in there somewhere. He's at 59, so I guess he sort of profiles. But like Daniel Gafford is now fighting with Derek Lively. I still think Gafford, by the way, has some value this year, but it's not the same. Gobert is up in the early 50s instead of the 60s this time around. And then you got to push pretty far down the board. Do you want to go Valanciunas at 72? So it's a different shaped rank board. And I don't know that that's what it's going to be a couple weeks from now, but it has a different shape to it today than it did last year, where there were all of those big men clustered in the middle. Now they've pushed earlier and later. Jared Allen is earlier as well. Nick Claxton pushed later. All of these guys that were like 45 to 65, now a lot of them are right at the front end near 45, and a bunch of them are at 65 to 80. So how does that create a possible punt strategy or a series of them? And we'll talk to Adam about that later on today. Tomorrow on the podcast, we will also be going 2 episodes. Dan Titus will be with us for one of those 2. We can bug him a little bit about the Yahoo schedule and also, of course, his winners on this first Yahoo board. I keep saying I'm going to do a team preview, and then other things keep popping up. I was given graciously the results of a kind of a ringers draft, and I'd like to go over those in the next couple of days as well. Sort of results from an early draft of people, extremely competitive people as well. So that should be a lot of fun. Friday, we'll be talking to Josh Lloyd. That'll be early afternoon showtime. Maybe that's a day we finally get a team preview in, or maybe that's the day I go 51 to 75 on my own opinion on the Yahoo board. There is so much to cover. It's crazy and it's wonderful. And we're just going to knock them out 35 to 45 minutes at a time. So to that end, once again, big thank you to Matt Smith for jumping on with us today. He is S-Man Sports. I'm at Dan Besbris. Follow at Old Man Squad. Like, rate, subscribe. Have a wonderful next few hours. And I'll talk to you again later on today. That's how busy we are. I'll see you then.